The story begins with a boy named Angus. His mother sent him to swim in the sea, but he chose to sit quietly on the shore instead. Then he noticed a large egg half buried in the water. He picked it up and studied it closely. Just as his mother arrived, calling him home, Angus quickly hid the egg in his bucket and followed Annie back. Annie was annoyed because Angus hadn't tried to swim, but he said nothing. When they reached home, he quietly slipped into his father's workshop. Soon, his sister Christy came home and asked Annie what Angus had done at the sea that day. Annie replied that he simply sat alone as he always did. Meanwhile, Angus placed his things down in his father Charlie's workshop. Charlie was away, serving in the army. Angus looked at his father's photograph, then at the calendar, wondering when Charlie might return. He then washed the egg, removed its outer layer, and was amazed to see a bright blue surface beneath. Before it could hatch, Annie called out for him again, so he left it there and rushed back inside. That night, heavy rain poured down and Angus, worried the egg wouldn't be safe in the workshop, he ran through the storm only to find it had already cracked open. Peering inside, he saw a strange little creature. When he reached out, it snapped at him, and Angus guessed it was simply hungry. He hurried off to fetch some food, and when he came back, the creature had calmed. As he fed it gently, Annie called him again. Reluctantly, he went to bed. The next morning, Angus woke to see a group of soldiers outside the house. He, Annie, and Christy met Captain Hamilton, who told them enemy forces might attempt to invade from the sea. The captain said his men would stay in their house to defend the coast. They carried in supplies and set up their posts. Annie told Christy and Angus to stay in their room. Later, Angus searched the library for a book about the strange creature. When he returned to the workshop, it was in disarray and the creature was chewing on Charlie's boots. Realizing it was hungry, he went to the kitchen for food, but Sergeant Strunk, the cook, blocked his way. Angus insisted the creature needed to eat, but Strunk refused until Angus offered to take out the garbage. Then he agreed. Using scraps from the bin, Angus fed his new friend, who ate with excitement. He named him Crusoe. After finishing the food, Crusoe splashed happily in a bin of water Angus had filled. Meanwhile, Captain Hamilton drilled his men hard, determined to keep them ready for attack. Angus left Crusoe in the workshop and slipped away so Annie wouldn't notice. Later, a man named Lewis came to town and went straight to the workshop where Annie worked. He asked for a job and Annie told him to start by cleaning the entire place. Lewis agreed and began at once. While cleaning, he took out the dust bin where Angus had hidden Crusoe. When Angus saw this, he ran to stop him, but the bin was already empty. Angus demanded to know who Lewis was and why he was in his father's workshop. He reminded him that Charlie would soon return from the war. Lewis said, "Listen, kid, your father can take over when he's back, but until then, I'm in charge." Realizing Crusoe was in danger, Angus rushed inside, looking for a safe place to hide him. Meanwhile, Crusoe had already slipped into the house. Sergeant Strunk's dog, Churchill, spotted him and gave chase, but the chain held him back. Crusoe darted into the bathroom just as Christy entered. She screamed and ran upstairs. Angus calmed her down and told her that Crusoe was his pet, hatched from the strange egg he had found by the sea. Christy was shaken but promised not to tell Annie, knowing Crusoe wouldn't hurt anyone. In the workshop, Annie gave Lewis some of Charlie's clothes to wash. Lewis paused and asked if Charlie might never return. With a heavy heart, Annie confessed that his ship had sunk at sea. Then she asked Lewis to repair a leak in the bathroom. When he knocked on the door, Angus and Christy tried to block him. After a tense silence, Lewis threatened to tell Annie what they were hiding. At last, Christy had no choice but to open the door. Lewis stepped in, saying he was there to fix the leak. Then his eyes landed on Crusoe. He froze and asked nervously, "What is that?" Angus explained everything about his strange new friend. Lewis, astonished, reached out, but Crusoe snapped at his hand. He exclaimed that the creature looked just like a seahorse, one of the rarest beings on Earth. According to legend, only one exists at a time. When one dies, another hatches from a new egg. He told them the seahorse possessed magical powers. Just as Annie knocked on the door, Angus pleaded with Lewis to help hide Crusoe, knowing Annie would never allow him inside. Lewis agreed. When Annie came in, she saw nothing unusual, though Crusoe peeked out from his hiding place. Lewis quickly distracted her. Later, outside, Annie met Captain Hamilton, who invited her to the soldiers' dinner. That night, Lewis told Angus they should return Crusoe to the sea where he belonged, but Angus refused, saying Crusoe was his friend. As the dinner began, Angus left Crusoe in the bathroom while he helped serve, forgetting to close the door. Crusoe took the chance to escape. Meanwhile, Churchill, Sergeant Strunk's dog, caught his scent and went wild searching. Spotting Crusoe, he chased him through the house, leapt onto the dining table and ruined the entire feast. Everyone blamed Churchill, who was in trouble for the mess. Crusoe slipped outside and dove into the fountain, happily feasting on fish. Angus searched everywhere for him, while Lewis promised to find and bring the creature back safely. After much searching, Lewis finally found Crusoe, now noticeably larger than before. Lewis called Angus, and when he saw how much Crusoe had grown, Angus knew it was time to let him go. Together they placed Crusoe in a truck and drove to the shore. With heavy hearts, they released him into the sea. Angus was devastated but understood it was the right thing. The next day, fishermen Jimmy and Huey were out at sea. When Huey felt a strong pull on their line, their boat began to sink, and suddenly a giant Crusoe rose before them. Stunned, Huey wanted to capture it for profit, but Jimmy refused. As Crusoe dragged the boat farther out, Jimmy cut the rope to save them. Watching the creature disappear into the waves, he was awed. He'd never seen anything so strange and magnificent. Meanwhile, Captain Hamilton informed Angus that his mother wanted him to begin army training immediately. Angus joined the soldiers and helped with their duties, but after a few days he grew restless. One morning he slipped away from Captain Hamilton and ran to the sea calling for Crusoe. There was no sign of him, so Angus took a small boat and rowed out to search. Suddenly, Crusoe burst from the water beside him, now enormous in size. With a mighty leap, he lifted Angus onto his back. Though scared at first, Angus soon relaxed and enjoyed the breathtaking ride. When Crusoe brought him safely to shore, Churchill, Sergeant Strunk's dog, caught the scent and dashed toward the waves. Strunk followed, stunned by the sight of such a massive, mysterious creature. That night, Angus eagerly told Christy and Lewis about his incredible adventure. They laughed and cheered, their joy filling the house. From the doorway, Annie smiled softly and turned to leave. Lewis followed and she thanked him. Because of him, she'd finally seen her children laugh again. Lewis simply chuckled and walked away. Meanwhile, Jimmy told a reporter named Jock about the strange creature he'd seen at sea. Jock believed the story could draw investors and tourists, but Huey disagreed, saying the town was fine as it was. Jock insisted the public deserved to know about a dangerous sea creature nearby. The next day, Captain Hamilton took Annie and her children to a nearby hill to show them his soldiers' preparations and demonstrate the weapons they used against invaders. Hamilton ordered his men to stage mock attacks on targets hidden in the water. Angus suddenly realized this could endanger Crusoe and begged Annie to stop the drill. She didn't understand his panic and told him to stay put. Even Christie's pleas went unheard. The soldiers began firing blanks into the shallows, and a terrified Crusoe fought to escape. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Jock waited by the shore, hoping to photograph the creature, but Crusoe stayed hidden. Frustrated, they built a rough model, took its photo, and printed it in the next day's paper. A few days later, Sergeant Strunk saw the picture and recognized the same monster he'd glimpsed before. He and several soldiers swore to find and destroy it. That night, Christy quietly entered Angus's room. Angus and Christy ran away from home, leading Lewis to the shore to find Crusoe. Angus called out, and after a tense pause, Crusoe surfaced. But he was wild, unrecognizable, and furious. He lunged past them and vanished beneath the waves. Angus, shaken, blamed Lewis. Letting Crusoe go had unleashed this danger. Meanwhile, Strunk and his men searched by boat, determined to hunt the creature down. As they neared the coast, Churchill's frantic barking broke the silence. Strunk steered toward the sound, and in a flash, Crusoe rose from the water and killed the dog. Moments later, the beach fell silent again. The soldiers, confused and terrified, opened fire at the water. Suddenly, Crusoe rammed their boat, throwing everyone overboard. Hearing the gunfire, Captain Hamilton assumed they were under attack. He ordered his men to fight back and told Annie to stay inside with the children. But when Annie found Christy, she learned Angus was missing. Panic set in. She couldn't leave him alone in a battle zone. Ignoring Hamilton's warnings, she followed him to the shore. Out on the water, Crusoe had gone berserk. He seized Sergeant Strunk in his jaws and flung him around like a rag doll. Angus arrived just in time and shouted for Crusoe, but the creature didn't respond. Angus waded into the shallows to reach him, slipped, and began to drown. Seeing this, Crusoe dropped Strunk and rushed to save him, pulling Angus safely to shore. Lewis ran over, and together they tried to revive him. After a tense moment, Angus gasped and opened his eyes. Overjoyed, he saw Crusoe standing nearby. Meanwhile, Hamilton learned there were no enemy boats, yet he kept his men firing into the sea. As he waded ashore, Crusoe quietly sank beneath the waves. Annie rushed to her son, relieved he was alive. When Angus tried to explain about Crusoe, she dismissed it as a child's fantasy and told him to stop dreaming. At that moment, Crusoe rose from the sea, and Annie finally realized Angus had been telling the truth. Hamilton stood frozen, staring at the enormous creature. The soldiers opened fire again, bullets striking the water. Angus climbed onto Crusoe's broad back, guiding him towards safety. Annie, terrified, begged Hamilton to stop the shooting, but their radios were dead. Hamilton, Lewis, and Annie jumped into a small boat and raced after them. Crusoe swam hard through the waves, but suddenly slammed into a massive net. The soldiers had set to trap enemy ships. Crusoe thrashed wildly against the net, struggling to break free. When Hamilton's boat pulled alongside, Lewis shouted for Angus to jump. Before leaving, Angus leaned close and whispered, "You're my best friend. I'll never forget you." Then he dove into the water and climbed aboard the boat. With one powerful surge, Crusoe leapt over the net and disappeared beneath the waves. Annie, Lewis, and Hamilton cheered. Crusoe was free at last. Did you enjoy this adventure, or did it feel a bit childish? Share your thoughts in the comments so we can bring you even better stories next time.